Gaetz is now the former congressman from Florida because he resigned from that post in preparation for his confirmation hearing. Is that right?
Yeah, Scarlett, he resigned in the almost immediate aftermath of the president-elect Donald Trump naming him as the attorney general designate. He resigned, though, specifically from this current Congress, the 118th. We do still have remaining questions as to whether or not he will take the seat he was reelected to in January for the 119th Congress, especially now considering the fact that he has withdrawn his nomination, his ability to be considered now for the attorney general post. Keep in mind, Scarlett, this comes just a day after the House Ethics Committee found themselves at a stalemate, if you will, on what to do with the report that was looking into Gaetz around allegations of sex trafficking, of drug use, many of which, of course, have resurfaced in media reports, including through attorneys from some of the alleged victims. In this, but essentially what Matt Gaetz has said here is after meetings on the Hill yesterday in which he was with the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance going to a number of Republican senators, he said it was becoming a distraction, or it was clear that his confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance administration, which is why he has withdrawn his name from consideration. So there's going to be a few questions. What happens to Matt Gaetz from here? Does he try to, in fact, take his seat in the 119th Congress? And then, of course, who will Donald Trump now appoint as Attorney General instead? A few that were on the short list, including Jay Clayton, the former chair of the SEC, have already been named to other roles. Clayton has been named to be the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, while Donald Trump's own personal attorney, who has been defending him in some of his ongoing legal cases, Todd Blanche, had been named Deputy AG, had been nominated to that post. We'll see if perhaps he is then selected for the Attorney General or where the President-elect will be going from here now that Matt Gaetz has pulled himself out of consideration, Scarlett.
And one of the big question marks when it comes to Matt Gaetz' nomination is what happens to that probe, the sexual misconduct probe that the House Ethics Committee was undertaking and was set to release a report on. Do we know if that's still going to happen, or because Matt Gaetz resigned from the current session that is put to bed immediately?
Well, Scarlett, that is what the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has said should happen here. It should not be released because Matt Gaetz is a former congressman, and therefore a report looking into a former member should not be released. The House Ethics Committee did meet on that matter yesterday. It is a committee that is evenly split along partisan lines, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, and they could not find consensus yesterday on a way forward. The line we were hearing from Republican members of Congress was that because the ethics report has not been finished, it shouldn't be voted on to be released. But we do know, according to the ranking member, the highest ranking Democrat on the Ethics Committee, Susan Wild, who spoke briefly to reporters yesterday, that the committee will be meeting again on this matter on December 5th once they return from the Thanksgiving recess. So at that time, we may have a bit more clarity as to whether the report is going to move forward to be completed in its entirety and then therefore potentially released. But now that he is no longer a candidate for Attorney General and is a former member, there may be some question now as to whether the actual contents of that report still matter here.
Yeah, really, really good points. So one thing about Matt Gaetz, because his nomination was so controversial, was this idea that the president-elect would get his confirmation done through a recess appointment. Now that Matt Gaetz has withdrawn his name from consideration, that's not an issue for him, but there are some other controversial picks. What do we know so far about how willing the Senate is to allow the president-elect to move forward with his nominations through recess appointments?
Well, the newly elected incoming Senate Majority leadership, Scarlett, has been quite vocal in saying they want to give all of these nominees their due in a quick process on confirmation as the Senate performs its advise and consent role. And we understand that to mean, by and large, the people Donald Trump has nominated will likely get through the Senate. There are a few exceptions. Some of those more controversial nominees that you have alluded to, RFK Jr., for example, to lead Health and Human Services, has faced some backlash, not just because of his view on vaccines, but also on the issue of abortion, which bothers some conservatives. Then there is Tulsi Gabbard, who has been nominated for Director of National Intelligence. Those intelligence-minded folks, the Intelligence Committee, may have some difficulty with that particular nomination. And then the one really in focus today, in fact, spending some time today meeting with senators on Capitol Hill, is the Defense Secretary nominee, the Fox News personality Pete Hegseth, who is facing allegations of sexual assault from back in 2017 that have caused a lot of questions around his candidacy for the role, in addition to questions around his qualifications for the job leading the U.S. military. So there are still a number of nominees here who could face a big hurdle to getting that majority in the Senate needed for confirmation. Matt Gaetz was taking a lot of attention and scrutiny away from those people. Now that he's out, though, the spotlight will turn back to some of those folks, Scarlett.